Hey there, I'm Aaron Cheslock. Welcome into In Depth with Fox Carolina Sports. As we do each week, we catch up with local coaches and athletes and walk their path to the particular point in their careers. But we're going to switch it up a little bit this week. Bring out one of my good buddies from the media circuit, the one and only Jed Blackwell. And you'd be hard-pressed to find anybody in the state of South Carolina that covers high school sports better than Jed. In my opinion, he is the best to do it in the entire state of South Carolina. And the reason we're doing this is it's been a crazy high school football season with about as crazy of an ending as you could think of. And really, that could apply to many of these classes. So I wanted to bring Jed on and really recap it all, what it means moving forward. First of all, Mr. Blackwell, thanks for taking some time with us. How you doing, man?
Thanks for having me. It's been a while. I'm glad to talk to you again.
It's been too long. I want to start in 5A, and obviously we start with where it ended. One of the, I'd have to call it the best high school game I've ever attended, to be honest with you. And it's an upset for a program that has 18 state championships now, which is hard to say. The Gaffney Indians get it done by knocking off Dutch Fork, a come-from-behind victory. They were down 19-7 in the fourth quarter. Jed, what do you make of this performance by Gaffney? We saw what they did against Spartanburg in the upper state championships. They were down early then. We've seen it multiple times this year where Gaffney manages to rally from an early deficit. They simply don't give up. But when you knock off Dutch Fork, who'd won 62 straight games, the five-time defending 5A champs, that's a pretty good feather in the cap there.
Yeah, and I told everybody all year that I thought that Grayson Loftus, Gaffney's quarterback, made them dynamic enough that they could do something like that. He was kind of a caretaker. He didn't have to do too much. When you've got Tyler Smith and Ken Littlejohn in the backfield, they're averaging 200 yards a game as a unit. I think Gaffney averaged right at 250, 275 as a team per game on the ground. Your quarterback doesn't have to do a lot of things. When you run the ball that well and you play good defense, I said all year I thought Loftus was capable of stepping up and winning a game when he had to. And that last throw, man, that was a rope. The game-winning touchdown was a Saturday throw. That's a big boy throw. And Edward Jeffries was right there and powered his way in. And then what struck me the most was that last, Dutch Fork's rallied a lot. They're a team when the two championship wins over Dorman have been rallies. Another couple of times, Fort Dorchester, they put together a couple big plays when they needed them. But Gaffney was just more physical down the stretch. That last drive, Gaffney was just all over the place defensively. It was one of those things where you could kind of see it coming. Like you mentioned the Spartanburg game where they flipped that switch in the third quarter, and it went from nothing. It went from a very good game to over in half a heartbeat. It seemed like they had that capability. They were that kind of team all year, and if you let a Gaffney hang around, these are things that are going to happen. I think they were the two most deserving teams in 5A, and Gaffney coming out on top, like you mentioned, is kind of a win for the ages at this point.
When you think about what the Gaffney program has done, I mean, they're kind of where the bar is. Certainly in the upstate of South Carolina, 18 state championships. And I'm interviewing Dan Jones after the game, the Gaffney Indians head coach, and I said, you kind of dethroned Dutch Fork, and I think that's an appropriate question given recent history. And Coach Jones was quick to correct me to say, hey, this is our 18th state championship. They didn't consider it an upset. Gaffney, these two teams were supposed to meet up earlier in the season. Dutch Fork had an unfortunate, untimely death of one of their players. So obviously that tragedy postponed that game. But, on the field, we thought for a long time that these were the two best teams in 5A. We end up getting the game in the state championship. When you think about the mental toughness it takes to go, Antonio Williams had an incredible game. The guy that's getting looked at by big-time college programs, including Clemson and South Carolina. He puts Dutch Fork up 19-7 in the fourth quarter. the mental toughness it takes for a team in Columbia to rally against Dutch Fork, knowing they hadn't lost in 62 straight games. How do you encapsulate that as best you can? Obviously, we've seen them do it before this year. You think about the game against Northwestern in the playoffs. They won that on a field goal in overtime. It was a tough game against TL Hanna in the second round for Gaffney. But when you do it against Dutch Fork on this stage, a team that's won 5 straight, it's really a different level, is it not?
It is. And the Hanna game helped. The Northwestern game helped. Dorman in the regular season helped. Gray Collegiate in the regular season helped when they had they kind of pulled it in front and kind of let it get away and had to grab it back. All of those things help, but what helped the most is the fact that it says Gaffney on the front of the jersey. Honestly, they're not intimidated by anything. They're not scared of anything. They're not going to get down and not be able to rally. They're weathered. They've been there. They've done some things. And I happened to hear Coach Jones talking to the team after the Spartanburg game, walking off. He said, most of you were in grade school the last time Gaffney contended for a state title. He said, but I bet all of you were in the stands. And it's that kind of thing. It's that kind of community, that kind of feeling around the program that really, you're not going to intimidate Gaffney. You're not going to, there's not going to be a moment that's too big for Gaffney. They're not going to win them all, but they're not going to be, they're not going to be awestruck by anything that's going on.
I want to move around 5A. Obviously, Gaffney dethrones Dutch Fork as the kings of the class this year. Dutch Fork likely not going anywhere. Tom Knotts has done a remarkable job building that juggernaut. When you look at the power structure of 5A moving forward into next year, Dorman's going through a major change, as Dave Gutshaw calls it a career, one of the all-time greats in the state of South Carolina. Burns, you figure, will rally and be back. The Rebels had a ton of injuries and COVID issues this year, and they just had a hard time getting full strength week in, week out. You look at TL Hanna as a threat. Who am I forgetting? Spartan High, again, with Raheem Jeter and what Mark Hodge has done there. If you have any doubts that Coach Hodge can coach some football now, that he is building that program to get the Vikings right back to where they were. How do you break this down? Is there a team in Greenville County that caught your eye? What are you looking at as we head to the offseason and into next year in the 5A class?
I think it's kind of a usual suspects kind of deal. The Dorman coaching situation is going to be the major wild card there. If they've got some continuity, if they can find somebody that can direct the offense. That was the challenge at times this year for Dorman. Hanna, I think, is going to be right there. Dutch Fork obviously isn't going anywhere. Fort Dorchester, I don't think, is going anywhere. Zoltan Osborne's coming back. He's an amazing player at quarterback for them. Spartanburg, Burns, Gaffney, all are going to be right there. Loftus is a junior, just like Raheem Jeter is at Spartanburg. Greenville County, Hillcrest did some great things this year. They look really good. I think they're a candidate next year. McFadden, I believe, is an underclassman. Not sure on that. I have to double check myself. I think it's going to be kind of a same teams, but it could be a little different scenario. Burns could take a step up. Spartanburg certainly looks poised to take a step up. Dorman could be back in major contention. And then you go a little bit over to the east and you've got Northwestern, and they played really, really well. I think it's going to be fun.
I do want to give you a moment here because, I mentioned Coach Gutshaw and Rick Tate over at Boiling Springs, the Bulldogs coach for more than 2 decades, also called it a career. Those are 2 major names in the Spartanburg area. What do each of those guys mean to their program, and how hard will they be to replace for both Dorman and Boiling Springs, respectively?
Well, they're irreplaceable. Rick Tate's a Boiling Springs lifer, played there, coached there almost his entire career, won golf championships there. I mean, he's a heck of a golf coach in addition to football. took them to the only state title that they played for. Rick's going to be hard to replace. He'll be harder to replace from a community involvement standpoint because everybody knows Rick Tate. He's the guy. He's going to be difficult to replace there from that capacity. And Coach Gutschall is, quite frankly, every bit of football success that Dorman has ever had. It's hard to overstate what he means. It sounds like, if he said it, it would sound like he's bragging, and he's not going to do that. If anybody else says it, it just sounds kind of preposterous, but he invented the spread in high school football. It's going to be amazing for people to see how many times he turned 8 wins into 11 wins, and he did it over and over and over. And he's literally every bit of success Dorman has had on the football field. I'm not going to say all of it. 90% of it has come since 1993. And that's the Dave Gutschall era. And,
obviously the records, the statistics, the year in, year out success that he has in one of the toughest places to win in terms of, the region, the high school football area in Spartanburg County, but just really one of the best guys you'll ever meet. Even when I first started in the upstate, Coach Gutschall was super welcoming. You might have forgot my name a couple times, but there are a lot of guys that have come and gone in his tenure while coaching over there at Dorman. So, both him and Coach Tate are big time members of the prep sports scenes here in the upstate, and they'll certainly be missed. Let's kind of whip through these other classes. 4A, we saw South Point claim the state championship. It's tough to say they weren't the best team, but, a couple teams that caught my eye out of the upstate were the Greenville Red Raiders. What Greg Porter's done there has been pretty impressive. And then Greenwood, with Chris Liner over there, is turning into a juggernaut themselves. Both those teams look very, very good. South Point, perennial powerhouse. What do you make of how 4A shook out this year, and what do you see going into next year?
I love the fact that Devontae Holloman won one at South Point. Anytime you got a player coming back who had some success there, who created kind of the story of that program, and now he's taking them to state titles and winning them, that's a neat story. But you mentioned Greenville and Greenwood. If you would give me their regular season 1-point matchup every game I ever saw, I'd be content. They were amazing this year. Pro Franklin at Greenville, honestly, I never felt like Greenville was out of a game, because I felt like if you gave him the last shot, he was probably gonna get them there. He's just a winner, and I know they're graduating some talent. Franklin's gone, Sadler's gone, but they've got some guys coming back. And Greg Porter has done. I joke all the time. If I was Greg Porter, my resume would say I won the state title at Hillcrest. That's it. That's all it would say. I won the Big 16 title at Hillcrest. That dude can coach some football, and he's got them right where they want it. They're just about to break through. I think good things are coming for Greenville. And Greenwood is getting back to those glory days that they had in the past, just pound you into submission football. And it's great to see. That's what the people down there love. That's what Greenwood was built on, and they're doing it again. And I'm excited about what that's going to look like. With realignment coming, I think those are going to be some things that kind of stay the same. I think Greenwood and Greenville are going to be right around the same size they are now. And I think those are some matchups that we're going to get to see for years to come.
Josh Sapp, another big name on Greenville that's playing for the Clemson Tigers. And, Judge just mentioned Greg Porter winning at Hillcrest. We just mentioned all those big-time Spartanburg County teams. And, Dutch Fork was just coming into their own at that point. It can't be overstated how impressive it was that Greg Porter built the Hillcrest program into a state champion. And now all of a sudden he's doing the exact same thing in 4A at Greenville. They look like a program on the rise and one tough to beat. Speaking of programs tough to beat, nobody even came close to beating the D.W. Daniel Lions in 3A. You talk about domination. They won every single game by double-digit points. Trent Pierman, the star quarterback, just named, as we're recording this, the South Carolina Gatorade Player of the Year for the second straight year. The numbers are video game numbers. The defense was dominant. The offense piles on points. Jeff Fruster has built when Randy Robinson left, a lot of us questioned what happens with the Daniel program moving forward. Are they going to be able to, contend? I believe there were 4A at that point, but it's like, where do the Lions go from here? And all of a sudden, back-to-back state championships. And this year, there wasn't really a doubt in any one of these games.
No, and another guy who played there, who knows the expectations, who's been through the program and been through the wars as an assistant. And hats off to the administration, because they weren't very good, Coach Fruster's first couple of years. They struggled a little bit in that move from 3A to 4A. They struggled a while, and they were patient, and they believed in what he was doing, and he believed in what he was doing, and he got the kids to buy into what he was doing. And man, you look at the proof. You've got a 2-time now Gatorade Player of the Year in Pearman. You've got weapons everywhere. Eli Merck is one of the most underrated receivers I've seen. Myson Kelly the other day in the state championship was just all over the place. Jaheim Lawson on the defensive side. You're right. There are too many names to mention. I'll leave somebody out when I start talking about these video game numbers that they put up. And they, the other day they had a little bit of a hard time closing Camden out. It was 10. And Camden had the ball and was threatening to score. And then it was 25 and over, because they just hit you from all directions at once, it seems like. Those Chapman 3A teams in 18, 19 were some of the best offensive football teams I've ever seen. And I think these Daniel teams now are on par with those.
Yeah, that would be quite the matchup if we could line those two up right there.
Right.
60-59, to be honest with you. Daniel looks like a wagon. I don't know who's slowing him down. They'll lose some talent, but in that area of the state, they seem to reload with local boys year in, year out. Great collegiate in 2A. I'll talk about them in a second, but I think the biggest shocker in 2A was that the Abbeville Panthers weren't playing for a state championship.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nichols has made it a yearly routine to be playing for state over there in Abbeville. They got beat, plain and simple, 31-15. Gray's given them problems in the past. What do you make of Abbeville falling short this year? Are they going anywhere?
I don't think they're going anywhere. I think Abbeville winning championship. I've got a buddy who went down there. He coaches at another school, and they got put out early, and he went down to see Abbeville. And his summation of things is, when all you're doing is playing for that A on the side of the helmet, it means a little bit different. And that's what it's still small town. My little town's better than your little town. And we're about to show you why for 32 minutes football down there. It means something in Abbeville. I don't think they're going anywhere. Coach Nichols always puts a competitive team on the field, but more than that, when you run that offense that he runs, when you do some of the different things that he does, you do have to believe in it. And they really do. And I honestly think they did lose it this year, but I think it's theirs to lose pretty much every year.
Looking at Gray Collegiate, you look at this running back, KZ Adams. When you think about the greats that you've seen in your time, more than 2 decades covering high school sports here in South Carolina, you think of the best running backs that you've seen. Marcus Lattimore, Stephen Davis. Where does this kid rank? Is he in that class? Because the numbers are absurd, and he really ran right through the entire postseason in all of 2A.
There was a kid named Stan Manning who played for Dillon back in the 90s. He's on that list with the two you mentioned, and yeah, KZ Adams is on there too. He's the kind of kid where you literally hold your breath every time he touches it. I watched Lattimore rush for 308 in the state finals against Sumter in 2008, and they were hard yards and they were rugged yards, and he was moving the chains and grinding the clock. And Adams rushed for 309 the other day and could probably have rushed for 500. he's so sudden with his running that it's honestly kind of, you don't know for sure what you're watching sometimes. He's definitely on the list of the best that I've ever seen.
When you think about where 2A goes from here, Abbeville is probably going to be there for the foreseeable future. Gray brings in a good team year in, year out. We saw improvement from St. Joe's and Christ Church in Greenville County. Really the biggest leap for Christ Church since Don Frost won all those games in a row in Class A state championships. Since they moved up to 2A, do you see anything in terms of a state title contender from either of those two programs in Greenville County in 2A, knowing that the juggernaut in Abbeville is still right there and the lower state still pretty impressive as well?
Those two play enough defense that one of them can contend for the problem's going to be they have to run through each other all the time. But that game, that playoff game they played, that was 3-0. That was beautiful. That was beautiful football.
Well, it's beautiful unless you're a local sportscaster trying to get highlights on the air.
Well, yeah, I could see that.
And you got nothing. And
I could definitely see
it went
that.
to overtime, and I had to bail to get on TV, and I'm like, well, one way or the other.
I think both of them have enough defense that they can contend. It's a different matter to go down and stop Abbeville, and 2A has been it's been a challenge because you've got Abbeville and Gray, obviously, but then the traditional powers in the lower state are coming back too. The Barnwells and Silver Bluffs of the world, who were so good for so long, they're right there. That they're coming back as well. And I think realignment's going to be questionable in 2A. I think 2A might be the division it affects the most.
Class A was Southside Christian and really nobody else in the upper state. They blew through the playoffs after a dominant regular season. What Mike Sonneborn's done there, and it's really different philosophies that he's won. He's won back-to-back state championships now after they won their first in 2015, and whether it was more of a pro-style offense with J.W. Hertzberg into kind of a quarterback with a dual threat like Ja'Cory Martin. They have proven that they are the team to beat right now in Class A. And to be honest with you, I was at the state championship game they played against Bamberg Earhart. And, Bamberg had a really good defense. And I thought they had a pretty good game plan against Southside Christian. Turned the ball over a couple times on Martin, and they simply couldn't get anything done with it because the Sabres defense is just so stout and so disciplined. And they really do play fundamental football to a T. Is that the story of Class A? It's Southside Christian coasting and everything else is second tier?
I honestly think so. I had a couple of 1A coaches this year tell me that they thought Southside Christian could contend in 2A. They thought they could have stepped up and maybe made a run at the 2A title as well. And like you're talking about the other day, Bamberg played incredible defense. They played well enough to win defensively. Had they not only had 80 yards of offense going into the late fourth quarter, it was just Southside Christian's defense was on a completely different level the other day. Michael Kennedy is amazing. Tyler Sonneborn plays some defense as well. Ball Hawks back in the secondary. They're so good. And like you said, so sound and so fundamental that you've almost got to wait for them to make a mistake, and they don't make many.
And again, a lot of that is due to great players that they have, but a coaching staff that has really locked in discipline to this football team. The Sabres look like a powerhouse moving forward in that class. Jed, before we let you go, and I do certainly appreciate the insight and you giving us some time, when you think about what the 2020-2021 season will be most memorable for, we've come a long way in the last, 18, 24 months. We had the 2019-2020 season where it was a lot of COVID concerns and a lot of cancellations and schedules being jumbled. And we had some of that to start this year. Thankfully, the bulk of these games happened. Stands were filled. It looked like things were back to normal. But when we're talking about the storylines on the field, that means that we are getting a little bit closer to normal. What are the things that are going to stick out most to you? I got to assume Gaffney over Dutch Fork's number one there.
Yeah, that is definitely, I think that's the top story. Anytime you have a 60-some game unbeaten streak snapped, that's the story. The way Dutch Fork rallied around the young man who passed away after practice, that's a story that sticks out. Spartanburg's reemergence under Mark Hodge, we talked about that earlier. That sticks out. The two longtime coaches in Spartanburg that we talked about a moment ago, that's going to be a major story moving forward as we go. But more than anything, you hit the nail on the head, the return to something close to normal. You look at the state champions, Southside Christian, I think, was 13 or 14-0. Gaffney was, I think Gaffney made it the full 15. I think they finished 15-0. Gray Collegiate played 13 or 14 games. Playing almost a complete season for a lot of these guys. And honestly, in August, I didn't think we were going to be talking about it. I didn't think it was going to happen. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop for the entirety of August and the beginning of September. But then we hit a little crest and things started rolling. And I'm pretty amazed that it was as normal as it ended up.
And that's certainly, the vaccine has a lot to do with that, but it's certainly something to be thankful for, that we got sports on all three levels back after going so long without sports. That kind of seems like a distant memory, but now that we are back to where things should be, it certainly feels a lot better. And, as we put a bow on this high school football season, again, I can't thank Jed Blackwell enough for taking some time with us, Jed. You've always been a source of insight to me as well as a good friend. But I speak for the majority of the upstate who are involved, follow, fans of high school prep sports, to say it can't be overstated how important your work is, telling the stories of these kids. And it means a great deal to all of us that are fans and love following these stories week in and week out. Tell the folks where they can follow you right now.
I am at prepredzone, southcarolina.com. You can also read my manic ramblings from time to time at jedblackwell.com. There's more of that to come very soon.
I have trouble getting out of conversations with the guy. I don't know if I'd suggest that. But certainly follow his high school sports coverage. Jed, thanks so much. Appreciate it, man. And get geared up for basketball here coming up.
Thanks for having me. Let's get ready.
That's a wrap for this week's episode of In Depth with Fox Carolina Sports. Hope you enjoyed the little detour from our usual path. Be right back here next week with another great episode for you. Have a great one, everyone.